guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Neighbors Created an Illegal HOA in the Neighborhood. I sued everyone. HOA got disbanded. I discovered a few years ago that I lived in a neighborhood full of no-good crooks. All of them. I bought my house in my old neighborhood over 30 years ago. Most people have come and gone and I'm the only one left there still. That's when these new folks decided that they thought Drake's Landing needed a homeowners association. For what? I'm not even sure. Probably just to take money from me and those of us who don't care. We don't even have any common areas to keep up to date. No pool, no playground, nothing. These people thought it would be some great thing to force everyone to sign up for the HOA. Well, I tell you what, I didn't sign shit 'cause they can't make me. As far as I'm concerned, they're just trying to pull some controlling power card over all of us. Telling us what to do, how tall our grass can be, where we can keep our trash cans, where to park my RV, they can go pound sand, damn it. It took me over a year to sue these idiots. They started sending me citations, talking nonsense about how I needed to pay my HOA dues. Well, I don't have any dues because I didn't agree to some no-good HOA. I refused to sign the paperwork when they sent it out the year before. I've lived in my house since 1988 and I didn't buy into an HOA and I never agreed to be part of one. Back in the day, this stuff was only voluntary, and I could send them money to take care of the sidewalks and the roads if I saw fit. Which I did sometimes, but it wasn't some monthly responsibility I was required to do. So, I started getting citations and fines and all this BS, saying that I'm past due on my HOA dues and whatnot. I was pretty pissed, and I maybe didn't respond to the first few because of what my wife calls me, stubborn as an ass attitude. She's probably right, but in the meantime of not responding, I was searching for an attorney because I knew I was going to need one to fight this. Per my attorney's instructions, I started responding to the letters. I only stated the truth in them, that I am not part of the HOA as I did not sign the HOA contract the year before when it came around. The response that I got in return to my letter was one that made me even more angry. The HOA stated that the entire neighborhood agreed to it and that it was a majority rule situation. Which is not how this is supposed to work, damn it. I have to agree. At this point, I'm so pissed that I'm willing to sue every single one of my neighbors on top of the stupid HOA. All 113 of them. I told my lawyer I wanted to pursue suing the neighbors as well, which he explained probably wouldn't benefit me, but I'm a man of principle and decided to see if it worked. What's the worst thing that could happen? The judge denies it. Either way, I still have a great case against the HOA. A few months of stubborn back and forth letters and emails with the HOA had me sick and tired of things. That's when I received a document saying that they were going to put a lien on my home until I paid them the HOA dues. Nowhere on my deed, title or the other paperwork shows that the HOA has any jurisdiction over my home, plus I literally own it. How can they even do that? I called my lawyer, up in arms about this news, and he assured me that my home was safe. I'm the kind of guy that will go out of their way to make a point known. I decided to put some signs up in my yard so everyone can see what I think of this HOA and their sheepy residents. One sign said, "Ban the HOA," and another said, "I deserve property rights." My wife said that I was just poking the bear, but what she didn't realize is that I was the bear. She didn't really like me going to all this trouble and said that the HOA kept the neighborhood looking nicer. But what she didn't understand was that it's my home that I own and my right to say that I don't want to buy into a HOA after living here without one for as long as we have. I preferred the old way that was a voluntary system where I could donate money yearly for maintenance and upkeep of some things. This BS they're trying to pull where they act like a landlord or apartment manager is completely overstepping. I did feel a little badly though, because it was extremely awkward for her at her neighborhood card club, so much so that she had actually stopped going. She said that some of the ladies she played with were being rude and ignoring her after everyone got the letter about us suing all of them and the HOA. I told her that they weren't her real friends anyway if they were going to treat her like that. My wife is sweet and lovely, and I knew that she would either make new friends or her old friends would get over it eventually. At the end of the day, my case against this HOA was solid. I didn't sign anything, agreeing to their darn association, therefore they couldn't dictate anything to do with my property. Something my lawyer discovered was that the neighborhood is actually built into 3 sections and each of those sections is controlled by a different governing body, or would be if there was one. Turns out, I'm in Section 3 and the HOA is in Section 2, also meaning that they don't have any jurisdiction over my home. That basically was the nail in the coffin for these dummies. By the time my case actually saw court, it felt like forever. It was almost a year after I started the process of my lawsuit against them and my neighbors in Drake's Landing. We had kept the information about the sections dividing the neighborhood, so when that finally came out, the judge just looked at them with an expression of, well, you're screwed. Which they were. Haha. The judge said that my case against the 113 neighbors was going to have to be handled in a different manner than the lawsuit against the HOA. She said that it would be difficult to pursue and essentially said that I should drop it and take what I can get out of my case against the association. I was okay with that in the end and really felt satisfied that maybe I managed to rattle a few cages. Judge took a few moments to look everything over again, making a face and shaking her head the entire time. That's when she brought up the section divide in the neighborhood, asking them if they knew anything about it. Apparently, they didn't realize it, or at least they chose to play dumb in the courtroom. She told them that just with that document alone, they had lost their case. It was an easy and obvious ruling after that, leading to her telling them to pay all of the lawyer and court fees, on top of what I asked for and more. I ended up walking out of there with them owing me almost $25,000. It felt great. Nothing ended up coming from me suing my neighbors, however, I think they got my point. I took my signs down and continued to keep my property looking nice and presentable. After all, I love my home and I was never the kind of old man that let his grass grow waist high or leave old, junky cars everywhere to begin with. It's true that some properties look crappy and run down when you don't have an HOA to micromanage everyone. But my point was that they can't go around doing what they want, especially when they have no legal leg to stand on. I will happily donate money every year to a voluntary HOA if they ever choose to start one. The next story is titled, "Nah, we don't need a professional to fell these trees, okay?" TLDR. Parents want to cut down some trees at the edge of the property all by themselves. I object and suggest hiring a professional due to safety and insurance concerns. Parents claim that's too expensive and proceed anyway. The operation goes hilariously wrong to the detriment of a neighbor's barn. Things turn out much costlier than the professional would have been. This is the story of how my dad, with my consent but against my advice, accidentally weaponized a tree. I live in the capital of a Central European country and recently visited my parents at the countryside. They needed me to help to deal with some trees they wanted to fell. I assumed they wanted to finally make short work of the semi-healthy trees along the driveway that kept branching into the way. But no. They decided that the row of beeches at the southeastern corner of the property had to go. You should know 3 things here. 1. Those trees are really tall, like 15 meters, about 50 feet, and rather thin. 2. There is an equally high barn just a few meters behind those trees on the neighbor's property to the south. It is pretty old but has been renovated time and time again to serve as a storage and party location. 3. In front of the trees are compost containers, a crooked walnut tree and bushes that my mother planted, creating a corridor of only around 7 meters, 23 feet, for the trees to land in without breaking anything. Also important. My sister, also living in a bigger city and not present when these events took place, and I are actually the co-owners of the house and property as my father transferred ownership to us some years ago. While so far, those beeches had survived their fair share of storms, they'd probably become a problem as they kept growing. And since new neighbors on the property bordering on the eastern side are in the process of building a house, they'd be their problem as well. So, I agreed that they had to go. However, my parents wanted to fell them by themselves, meaning my dad would be the one to operate the chainsaw on them. He worked as a technician before retiring, always did a lot of repairs and building work in and around the house. But he is past 70, has adopted a rather unhealthy lifestyle after leaving the workforce, and his eyesight and motoric skills, while still perfectly suited for most kinds of technical operations, have deteriorated a bit. Knowing this, I objected and suggested hiring a professional to do the job and sharing the costs. I argued that any damage, beechwood is pretty heavy, or injury that might occur if things went sideways wouldn't be covered by insurance and thus come in quite costly. Also, doing this without even as much as notifying the local authorities might be illegal. Okay, it's the countryside. If any regulations of such kind even exist, folks here like to interpret them as friendly advice, rather than an actual law, but I digress. My parents wouldn't have any of it and even refused to get an estimate from a professional. I did some basic research and found out that the costs would probably come in at around €500 to €1,000, $600 to $1,200. Not a small sum, but the forester or lumberjack who'd take up the work would be responsible for any damage. No dice, even after trying to bring my points across several times. Nah, we don't need a professional. Why should we waste money when we can do it by ourselves? They said. It will be fine, they said, literally. And while I usually am able to put them off bad ideas by convincing one of them, this time both were hellbent on going for it. And once that is the case, all hope is basically lost, as especially my mother can be the most stubborn as heck. At least I know whom I inherited this trait from. As property co-owner, I technically could have just forbidden my parents to fell those trees on their own. But they're my parents, I love them, they're adults, they live there and keep stuff in order, so I refrained from taking this route. So, I told them that they should go ahead if they really want to, but I would not help them with this. My mom asked if I would help them cutting it up and carrying the wood once the trees were laying on the ground, important aspect. I agreed. Also, I begged them to wait for my sister to call them the next day at lunchtime, since I messaged her about the situation, and she wanted to back me up. But no. Next morning, I was woken up by my mother calling me to help cutting up the first tree which my father had brought down successfully. So, I dutifully crawled out of bed and did my part in this little deforestation project. Tree 2 and 3, out of 5, also were felled without any incidents. Then came tree 4. My father apparently had not seen a higher up branch that stretched between the branches of tree 5. So once the chainsaw had fully severed the stem, instead of falling sideways as intended, it got caught up, swirled around its axis and crashed into the walnut tree, which started to bend significantly due to the load. Now they wanted me to help moving the beech by pushing it to roll along the edge of one of the walnut tree's main branches. Besides me knowing that this wasn't doable, as I said, a 15 meters high tree is a heavy affair, I refused. But you said you'd help us once a tree is felled, they pleaded. I pointed out that I'd only assist once it was laying on the ground, and leaning into the walnut tree doesn't quite fit that definition. More pleading, but now it was my time to be stubborn, and rightfully so. Since there was no way to, or machinery, to pull the beech away, my father decided to cut parts of its lower stem until handling it would be possible. Multiple laws of physics, however, intervened after he had cut the second large chunk, shifting the center of mass of the beech so that it suddenly started to tilt when its branches prevented it from sliding downwards as intended. Then the walnut tree reacted to the lighter load and shift of balance by springing back, knocking the beech into the neighbor's barn like a battering ram. The dry wooden wall planks didn't stand a chance and splintered away as the felled tree forced its way into the building, creating an impressive hole. My parents now stood there, dumbfounded. My dad slowly scratched his head and tried to realize the situation, while my mother slowly started to panic. Oh no, 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 what do we do now? What if the neighbor calls the police on us? I had watched the spectacle from the balcony and couldn't decide whether to be shocked or to descend into uncontrollable laughter. Closer investigation from outside showed that the tree had crushed a chair, a table, and also caused a cupboard with party equipment to collapse. Though my dad had at least reached his goal and freed the beech from the grasp of the walnut tree. But there was no way of getting it unstuck from the barn without entering. A few hours later, the neighbor, who knew about my parents' plans, returned home, which is where this story might have taken a very bitter and costly turn. But he proved to be a very gracious guy and took the incident, which in the worst case could have made the whole barn collapse, in stride. He first was negatively amazed by what had transpired, but after inspection of the barn he didn't deem it to be necessary to involve the insurance or officials and said he would repair the damage by himself if my parents agreed to pay for the materials, replacement of the destroyed furniture, thanks, neighbor, and some beer, probably a lot of beer, for his time, which they gladly accepted. His bill isn't yet in as he has just begun patching up the hole, but it will easily be upwards of €2,000, roughly $2,400. plus the beer of course, still making a professional tree removal look like a really good deal. My father offered him to assist with the repairs. The neighbor thought about it for the fraction of a second and then politely declined. I wonder why. P.S. Tree 5 is still standing. The last story is titled, My HOA will learn that I absolutely live by the letter of the law. My HOA recently changed the rules limiting the number of vehicles allowed in my driveway. I collect cars, all of which run, drive, and are registered and insured, and my household also has 4 licensed drivers. When I moved in, the rules stated, only one Class C vehicle allowed per driveway. Well, that was fine by me, since Class C vehicles don't exist. Class C vehicles were not defined in the HOA rules either. I assume whoever wrote that rule assumed since they had a Class C license, standard cars and trucks must be Class C. So, I moved in, and after stuffing 2 cars, 4 motorcycles and my camper in my garage, I placed 5 vehicles in my driveway. The letters came. I was quickly able to deflate them after asking them for the legal definition of a Class C vehicle. No fines paid. Fast forward about a year, and the HOA proposed a rule change. Now stating, 3 vehicles per driveway maximum. Since 3 is more than 1, and people lack critical thinking skills, it was passed with over 85% support. Fine. 3 vehicles it is. I did some digging and found the streets in my HOA were turned over to the city, an effort to avoid having to foot the maintenance bill I'm sure, and as such, the HOA had no authority to stop people from parking on a public street. So, I moved 2 vehicles through my very narrow street. One in front of my house, and one directly across the street in front of my neighbor's house. Now, the only vehicles that could safely drive past my home were motorcycles and the one guy with a smart car. It was glorious. My street is a main artery into and out of the neighborhood. Lots of U-turns and backtracking for folks to get home or to work. They are the ones who did the rest of the work for me. Complaints and calls to the HOA president resulted in another rule change vote. Now my driveway is open to any amount of legally registered vehicles. It fits 9. I need more cars. Thank you for listening.